Hello everybody and welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to Be Candid with me, your host Amber. If you are a returning customer, if you're back again for another episode, thank you so much for being here. And if you're brand new to the episode or to this podcast, today we are going to be talking all about fears, which is something a little bit different, but just something I thought would be quite interesting to talk about because, some people have light-hearted fears in terms of just things they're a bit scared of. Sometimes they can be completely irrational and make no sense to anyone but you. And sometimes they can be pretty deep and pretty scary and very real. So I thought it would be a fun subject to get into today. It's currently Saturday. I'm about to pull the plug out of my microphone, which won't be great. I lied. It's not Saturday at all. It's currently Sunday. Christian, my boyfriend, is out for the cycle today. I've got the house to myself, which we all know by now is my favourite times to be able to record a podcast because I can just chill with you guys. We can just catch up, have some girl time, give each other the lowdown. At least I can pretend we're giving each other the lowdown. I always feel like I've had a really good conversation with a friend after these podcasts, so I hope you feel that way too. But I think to start off, as always, we'll get into a little life update. What can I tell you? Yesterday night, we went on a date night for the first time in a very long time. If you didn't know, I live in London, in Brixton, and obviously everything is starting to open back up now in England in terms of restaurants and bars, and you can sit inside now, which is really nice. And a couple of weeks ago, I was just kind of getting sick of, walking around the park and going to the same cafe. As lovely as it is, and any other weekend or any other time in my life, I would have really loved those moments, but it's just when it starts to get very repetitive, and I was just kind of getting in a bit of a rut. So I just decided, and I didn't consult anyone on this, I just got on my phone, booked a restaurant, booked a little fun activity for after dinner, and just went up to Christian and was like, we've got a date night booked in 2 weeks' time. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but we're going to go out and have a nice time. And it was really fun because I think it was kind of a surprise. I was more excited for the reveal of it, and obviously Christian had no idea what it was, so it just made it more exciting and it felt like a proper date. Even though obviously we lived together and we were arriving together and all of this stuff, it still had that kind of sense of excitement, which was really nice. So we went to dinner at Scarlet Green in Soho, which is an Australian restaurant. I had never been to an Australian restaurant before, and it's not cheap by any means. It's a medium ranged restaurant. I would say the mains are about around £18, but it was so good, so good. I was kind of nervous just because they're very well known for their bottomless brunches, and it did seem quite like a girls' place. You'd go with the girls for a few cocktails, so I was kind of nervous Christian wouldn't like it, but he ended up ordering a steak, and he said it was the best steak he had ever had. The food was next level, so that was really nice. And then I had a little bit of an interlude. There was a gap between the end of our dinner and our next activity, which was crazy golf, which we used to do all the time, especially when we first started dating. But obviously we haven't been able to do it recently at all. So we went to Swingers in West End, which is a crazy golf place there. It's so cool. They have a bar and everything. It's really nice. So we were going there at 9:30, but we finished dinner at 7. I think we ate quite quickly because I think our reservation was at 6:30, and I think we finished eating by 7:15. So yeah, and I had the idea of going to, there's this bar that supposedly does the best Guinness in London called Toucan, which is right where I used to work. So I was like, we can go there and have a drink, because it's one of those places, they have them a lot in London, where you just grab a drink and you can stand on the side of the road, which sounds really strange, but you just pile out of the pub and all just stand around and drink your drink, and it's lovely. But they weren't allowing that, but I think with the licensing or COVID or whatever, and I was like, okay, we can just get some drinks and go sit in Soho Square, which is a lovely little green bit. But then Soho Square was closed, so I got really unlucky with my backup plan. So it was a little bit unfortunate. We were just kind of wandering around, did so many steps, but finally got into Swingers, had a game of golf. Christian won. I was very close, but he stole my victory. But yeah, it was really, really nice. So that was fun. We also ended up like getting back at like midnight, which I also haven't done like with Christian for a while. I've been on a few girls' nights, but even then we've got home before 12, I want to say, because everywhere closes now. I also have a story about a lost package, which I thought was kind of funny. Basically, a brand had got in touch wanting to send me something for an Instagram post. I was like, yeah, this absolutely sounds really good. Gave them my address, and then I had like like a shipper's email through saying like it was on its way or it would arrive on Friday or whatever, and then nothing ever showed up. And I was like, oh god, like it's just going to be delayed, which is annoying because I wanted to shoot the photo, etc, etc. And then I went on to like the tracking details to have a bit of a better look, and there was proof of delivery, and I could see the parcel outside the front door on the step. It was not my front door, and I freaked out because it's quite an expensive thing this brand was sending me. And so I was panicking. I was like, oh my gosh, whose front door is that? I was like trying to rack my brain thinking about our neighbourhood and have I seen that front door before and anything like that. And then I looked at what address I had put into the shipping details, and I had put our current address, like the street name, but then the postcode I had used was my old postcode from Dulwich, where I used to live. I was like, oh my god, this is so unfortunate. So I messaged my old flatmates who still live there, luckily, and was saying like, oh, did you get a package from me? They were like, we're away and we've been away for a week, so I hope it's still not on the front step, kind of thing. And I was panicking. I was like, I don't think it's your front step, because obviously that used to be my front door to my old house, so I know what it looks like. So I did a little bit of a investigator detection and went on Google Maps and typed in the number of my current house and my old address, because I was like, maybe they've just given it to the person with that number on that postcode. Do you know what I mean? Like my old neighbour. And so I was on like Google Street View or whatever, going down there to the street trying to find the front door, and I found it. So I managed to convince Christian, he was like cycling over that way, so I was like, please can you stop by and see if they have my package? And they did, and I was so happy because it had been like a week since this parcel had been delivered and I hadn't realised. Christian properly screwed me over though. He came home and was like pretending that they didn't have it or that they sent it back, and it was this whole ordeal. And I was stressing out, honestly freaking out. And he was like, no, just kidding, like, it's in my bag. Oh, what a nightmare. But yeah, only I could do that. So I've learnt my lesson. I'm going to be triple checking every tiny piece of information I ever put into another delivery ever again. But what a palaver. At least I found it, because honestly I don't know how that would have gone down otherwise. Like, kind of shameful. The last little thing that I just wanted to plug was Instagram Reels. I've spoken about this before, but I'm freaking loving Instagram Reels. I do a lot of them like about funny work things, which I quite like and you guys seem to really enjoy. But then recently I've been doing like some outfit ones or some ones when I'm like exploring London and stuff, and they're just so fun. Like, I don't know why it took me so long to get on it, kind of thing, but I think I've kind of screwed myself over because I started making Instagram Reels before TikTok, and now I find Instagram Reels way easier to use than TikTok, so my TikTok game is slightly slacking. But if you're ever thinking about making an Instagram Reel, I say freaking go for it, because it's so much fun. Okay, I feel like I've babbled enough. Shall we get into the fears? My fears specifically I'm going to be talking about, just like some random things. You'll see what I mean when we get into it. So, okay, so we'll take a step back in time. For ages, my biggest fear, because I feel like that's a question you get asked when people are like trying to get to know you or whatever, like, oh, what's your biggest fear, or what are you scared of the most? And I would always used to say my biggest fear was the thought of like the potential of not being able to have kids. That was like the biggest fear. I don't know why, I just always had it in my head. I think it's because I know like family members who have struggled to get pregnant, so I just kind of assumed that that would be my route as well. But now I'm thinking, you know, I think back in the day, like, that was what I thought my life's purpose was to have kids. Like, I was convinced that all I wanted in life was just to be a mum when I was like a teenager and stuff. But sitting here now as a 23-year-old, I can imagine my life without kids, so I feel like that fear has kind of taken a back seat and has been replaced by some other monsters, which is great, which we'll get into. But I just thought it was really funny how, like, something can play on your mind, and it's obviously one of those things that it's not necessarily a reality ever unless you're faced in that situation, like, way down the line. But as a teenager, that was my biggest fear, which I thought was really interesting, especially because I think it's not something everyone thinks about in terms of, like, if you don't necessarily know anyone that's struggled with pregnancy or getting pregnant or with their fertility and things, it's not really talked about in, like, movies and stuff. People just kind of fall pregnant. So I just thought that was kind of interesting that was my mindset as a teenager. I was also terrified about getting lost as a teenager. That was a big one, just because I think I was in year 7 or year 8. No, year 7. I was definitely year 7. So I had just started in my new secondary school. I was 12 or 13, I believe. And it was my first time. Maybe it wasn't my first time. A couple of times, maybe. Getting on the school bus to go home. And it was like £1. You hop on, get off at your stop. Everyone knows how a bus works. But it was like specifically a school bus for the kids. And I got on, paid my £1, was sat on the top deck. And I was kind of talking to my friends. I was like, some of my other friends haven't gone, which is weird. And then people started, like, getting off the bus, and I didn't really know where I was. And I think because I had been distracted by some other people, I hadn't really been paying attention. And then the bus stopped and was like, last stop. So I got off. I had no clue where I was, let me tell you. And at that age, I just had a mobile phone. I didn't have any other money or, like, a card on me or anything, because my mum had just given me £1 for the bus, like, when she dropped me off at school. And I had no idea what to do. I literally thought I was, like, stranded in Timbuktu. I tried calling my mum, but she was at work, so I don't think she picked up. I think I tried calling my nan as well, but I don't think she picked up. So in the end, I called my dad, who lives quite far away from me. Not, like, ages, but, like, a good half an hour, 45-minute drive from me. And I was bawling my eyes out. I was like, I'm lost. I don't know where I am. I got on the wrong bus. I don't have any money. And he was like, just stay where you are and I'll come find you. God knows how he found me, to be honest. I think I gave him, like, a street name or something, maybe. So he came and found me and dropped me home, which was so nice. And it's hilarious now looking back, because my nan moved house and she now lives on the corner where I was stranded and got lost. So I have that little moment of deja vu every time I walk past there. But I think from that moment on, I was just kind of nervous that I wouldn't know the way or whatever. So I would always triple check, like, Google Maps, or make sure whoever I was going with knew, or I'd pay such attention to, like, where the bus was going, or each time the bus mentioned the street name, whatever, I'd be, like, ticking it off in my head, like, oh yeah, 3 stops, 2 stops, 1 stop. So that was really funny. I think I have got better at it now, just because I have more resources, I guess. I'm not just, like, a 12-year-old girl. I have, like, my phone and friends, and London's very easy to get around, and I have my card with money on it and stuff, so, like, I can just get an Uber if I need to. So that's not really as much of a stress. Obviously, it's always nice to know where you're going, but I think there's some fun now getting lost. Like, it is a bit of an adventure. I just think at that age, I just felt very vulnerable and very alone, and I had no idea what my next steps were supposed to be. So I think having now experienced that, I can kind of figure out, like, oh, I'm not stranded. Like, I can make my way home somehow. The other fear I wanted to talk about, there's a couple of my next ones which I just think are quite common fears, so I just wanted to chat about them. So I think the first one, which I know a lot of people have, is, like, a fear of needles, like injections and stuff. And I'm really lucky, I think, in the sense that that's never been a huge fear of mine, in terms of, like, I don't enjoy it. Obviously, no one enjoys getting stabbed, but I don't think I've ever fainted from getting a needle stuck in my arm, but I just don't look. That is the tip. I sit down, I talk to the person, I try and make as much conversation as I can with them, because I think it's a nice distraction. Like, I'll ask them what they're doing at the weekend, or sometimes they'll ask me a question and I'll give them, like, a full-on essay as an answer, just to distract me from what's going on. And then I just do not look. I think if I saw the needle going into my skin, that already in my stomach, I feel like a pit in my stomach. I feel a bit queasy thinking about that. But in terms of like ear piercings and things, I just don't look. And so every time I had like an injection at school, or if I was going on holiday and needed like a jab or whatever, I think just not looking and just chatting my life away has been kind of my go-to. So I'm so thankful about that, because it is just one of those things that has to happen. Like, so many points in your life you need an injection, whether it's at the hospital, at a dentist, at a pharmacy, at school. Like, there are so many alternatives, or not alternatives, so many situations, places where that becomes a thing that is actually a reality, rather than me like panicking about my fertility, which who knows what's going on there. But a jab is a pretty certain thing, especially I guess with COVID, everyone getting vaccines and stuff. So I would just rather get it over with, not pay too much attention, than like dwell on it too much. So that's my top tip if you have a fear of needles. The other irrational fear that I have is spiders, which again, a lot of people can get behind. A lot of people have a fear of spiders and like phobias of spiders. And honestly, as a kid, my fear of spiders was pretty bad. Not like a phobia or anything, but just in the sense like, if I saw one, I would run away, I would not touch it, I would get someone else to take it out, etc, etc. And then I went into Duke of Edinburgh, which if you're not from England, you might not know, but it's basically like a challenge, I guess, you do in school, and you go on like a big hike over a couple of days. You have to do so many miles, and it's kind of like survival training, kind of. And so I did that, and I think from that, my fear of flies and bugs and spiders and worms and all of that kind of thing kind of disappeared, because you have to get real down and dirty, like nitty gritty kind of gross with the outdoors. So that kind of diminished my fear of spiders. I completely forgot about this one, actually. I have not written it down, but from Duke of Edinburgh, it gave me a fear of cows, which we'll get into. But my fear of spiders like completely left, which was great, because then when my friends freaked out, I would just get rid of it, which came in so handy, because Sarah, if you're listening, my university friend I lived with in second and a bit of third year, she had the worst fear of spiders. Like, she would scream if she saw a spider, and I was lucky at that point that I was like, oh, okay, I can just get rid of this spider, because I don't really have that fear anymore. So we were a good pair. But then as soon as Christian moved in, my boyfriend, something happened, like something just flicked. And it still happens today. Like, I'm home alone right now. If there was a spider crawling up my bed for whatever reason, I would quite happily get a cup, put it over, get some paper, throw it outside. Like, not an issue. However, if there was a spider crawling up my bed and Christian was here, I would be jumping out of the bed being like, oh my god, Christian, there's a spider, come and get the spider. And for whatever reason, I just can't do it when I know Christian's here. I think it's because mentally I know there's someone else that can deal with it that isn't me. Because I don't enjoy it. Christian quite likes like looking close at the spiders and whatever. That is not me. I am not a Boy Scout. Get those spiders away from me. If I have to deal with it, I will deal with it. But if Christian is here and I don't have to deal with it, I ain't going anywhere near it. But I just think it's weird how that happens. And I don't know if it's just me being like a bit of a loser and a bit of a wet wipe, being a bit like codependent on my boyfriend, because the same thing happens in restaurants. Like, when I'm out with my friends, I'll ask for the bill, but whenever I'm with Christian, I do not want to ask that waitress anything. I just know there's someone else who can do it, so I'm like, no, you just do it, I don't want to talk to her, thank you. And it's so bizarre, but that was definitely me as a kid. Like, I would never speak to waitresses in restaurants and stuff. I was terrified. Yeah, I nearly forgot. Going on to my fear of cows. This is a story for you. Girls on my Duke of Edinburgh course, if you're listening out there, I'm sorry that you're going to have to relive this with me, but it was traumatic, honestly. So we were on this Duke of Edinburgh hike, going through like the New Forest or something, I don't know, something really random. And there was this big field of cows that we had to go through, and I was kind of nervous about it. I think we all were a little bit, but we're like, it's fine, they're just cows, like in a field, they'll mind their own business. And there were quite a lot of them. I'd say there were like 30 cows. Anyway, we were walking through, like not really making eye contact, just minding our own business, and it was absolutely fine. And then once we got across that field, we came to another field, like a little bit more, like half the size, I guess, of the field that we had just walked through, with about 6 black cows in it. And I was like, okay guys, like don't worry, we're just going to walk through this one, like we can see the end, it's no big deal. So we all jumped over this gate, or like climbed over the gate that you were supposed to climb over, started walking all in a single file because we were just walking along the edge of the field line. And for whatever reason, I can't remember if like the cow started it or one of the girls started it, but all I remember is running. There was a lot of running. The cows started running, we started running, like literally screaming, which I don't think helped. And I got my head stuck in like a bramble bush, like the spiky bramble bushes. So I had to like rip my head out of that bush. It felt like freaking Velcro. And at the end, we were all throwing ourselves over this gate because it's like those step ladder gates. There's like 2 steps and then you have to cross over. But we've all got these huge bags on and 6 cows chasing after us, and there's 6 girls. So we're all trying to get over this fence as fast as possible, not realising that on the other side of this fence is stinging nettles. So I think my friend Brooke, who I've spoken about before on this podcast, fell face first into the stinging nettles, which was not pleasant, bless her. Her face was so swollen, and I think some other people like put their hands in it and stuff, and we ended up in the middle of the road, sobbing our eyes out. Like every single girl was crying. And I think me and my friend Fran were trying to like get everyone out of the middle of the road, being like, let's go sit on the field, like everybody calm down. And we did have a phone that we could call our like, what do you call them, supervisors with. So we called them just to say like, Brooke has been stung in the face by stinging nettles, like I don't know if it's gone in her eye, blah blah blah. So they came and checked on us to make sure everything was okay. And I was like debriefing them on what had happened. I was like, yeah, I even lost my sunglasses in the field. And then my supervisor goes and gets in the field with these manic cows, and it's absolutely fine. Like, they come up and sniff him, but he just doesn't move. So then, I don't know what I thought these cows were going to do, or what we thought these cows were going to do, but I honestly thought I was going to be trampled to death. And since then, I think I was like 15 or 16 at the time, cows have not been my friend. I'm just not a fan, you know? I've been scarred from that moment. I think now I'm a little bit better, but I just don't trust them. Like, as long as there's a fence between me and the cow, I think they're beautiful creatures, but I just don't want to be in a field with a cow at any point in my life. So, yeah, that's another fear. Very irrational. Let me know if you have a fear of cows, because I've never met anyone else, apart from obviously the girls that I was on Duke of Edinburgh with, who have had a fear of cows, but apparently it's just us. Okay, now it's time to get a little bit deep, I think. I think the next 2 things I'm going to talk about are like my main fears now as like a 23-year-old woman living in London. So the first one I don't think will come as a surprise to anyone. My biggest fear at the moment is like getting abducted or attacked by a man in the streets. You know, it's sad that it's such a big reality. And I think it was always something I was aware of, because you get told about it as a teenage girl, like, oh, be careful, and like, don't get in a car with anyone, and don't talk to strangers, and like, don't go home with anyone you don't know, or trust your intuition with like, if a guy feels like a creep, whatever, like, trust that and everything. And I'd always read like thriller books and stuff, so like girls always get abducted and things and horrible things in those books. And I remember there was a time me living in Greenwich, walking home from the O2, which is where I used to work. It would only be like a 10-15 minute walk from the O2 to my house, but sometimes I'd be walking home at like 2 a.m. because it was like after a gig or whatever. And I would be very paranoid about like any guy or any person I came across. And I think at that point I was like, I'm reading too many thrillers. Like, I need to take a step back because it is really making me paranoid, making me think about all these crazy things. And then I hadn't really thought about it. I think just because I live with my boyfriend. So whenever I would go out late at night, I was always like with someone or with my boyfriend, which obviously just made me feel like a lot more safe, like rather than walking down dark alleys by myself or what have you. And then obviously, unfortunately, recently, Sarah Everard got abducted and killed in London, like very close to where I live. She got abducted in Clapham Common, and that's like my local park. So that really hit home, I think, for a lot of people, like all of my friends as well. That was just just crazy and just so sad, and just a huge wake-up call, and just a really nasty reality that I didn't think I would ever have to face, or like really think about that hard, which is so naive, so silly of me, but it's true. I'm just being completely honest. And I think now that does play a lot on my mind, just because I think now living in Brixton, obviously the crime rates are slightly higher than certain other parts of London where I've lived before. And yeah, so that's just something that kind of makes me nervous. I try and take all the precautions I can, but like, so did Sarah Everard, and she's still in that situation, which is so sad. But I try and like lock all the doors when I go to sleep and stuff, and I have like a personal alarm on my keys that I take with me everywhere when I'm like walking home from a friend's house. And like, I try and walk on the high streets and don't take any back roads, and I'm on the phone to someone when I'm walking, and all of these things. And I've got like my emergency contacts and stuff set up on my iPhone. So there are obviously like precautions you can take, but it's just really unfortunate that that's something girls have to worry about. But I think I've realised like living in my ignorance and naivety probably wasn't the best way forward. So I'm trying to deal with that a little bit more proactively. But I would say that that is currently my biggest fear. My other fear, which I think I've had for a long time, but I feel like as I get older it becomes more real, is the fear of death. And I don't think it's necessarily my death. Like, I'm not really scared of dying, to be honest, which I don't know if that's strange to say at my age. But I feel like I've done a lot. Like, I've achieved a lot, I've experienced a lot. Like, I don't think it would be I don't know, I'm just not scared of it. Obviously I hope it doesn't happen, but it's not a fear of mine. Like, I don't fear dying, but I fear other people dying and like leaving me, because obviously my parents and my grandparents are all like getting older now, and I really feel it now, especially that I live away from home. Every time I go back to Bournemouth, like once a month or once every few months, especially during lockdown, when I think I went home like once every 6 months or something like that, I could really see them age. And I think obviously COVID took a lot out of a lot of people, just like the whole lockdown experience. So maybe that was one of the reasons why it seemed like they had aged as well. But it just becomes very apparent when you don't see someone every day, and then you go back to visit them, and it's like, oh, you've changed, you look different, like you look older, or like they've gotten slower, or they can't jump as high or walk as fast, or whatever it may be. So that kind of makes me nervous. But I think the other thing is obviously being in a loving, committed, long-term relationship with Christian. The thought of Christian dying scares the crap out of me, don't mind telling you. And it gets to one of those points where like anytime I watch a movie or read a book and like someone's loved one is in a coma or whatever, I'm like blubbering like a baby, because I just can't imagine being faced with that reality. Like, being forced into that situation would suck, I don't mind telling you. So obviously it's hard, because obviously that's a huge fear, but it's so out of my control, and it's almost a guarantee. Do you know what I mean? Like, at some point, some way or another, we're all gonna die. Like, all of my loved ones are gonna die at some point. So I am gonna have to face that reality eventually. I'm very lucky, touch wood, that I haven't really had to deal with that yet in any sense of the word. Like, my grandfather died when I was very young. I think I was like 2 or 3 when he died, but I wasn't really old enough to understand what was going on, and I don't remember him dying or like what that experience was like. So I know it's coming, and I know it's going to be horrific. So it's something I fear, honestly. Like, Christian going out today, it's like, oh, I hope he doesn't have an accident on his bike, or I hope he doesn't get hit by a car or whatever. But it's just one of those things that you just kind of have to manage, and I guess almost downplay in a sense, because if you fear that too much, you just won't live. Like, if I said to Christian, don't go out, I'm so scared that you're going to die, blah, 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 like, that's not fun for anyone, and he would like resent me for being here, and then I'd feel silly for making him stay here and all of that kind of thing. So it is something you have to kind of get your head around, manage, but it's definitely a fear, it's definitely scary. And I think dealing with that, like a parent's death or a grandparent's death, whoever it may be, is really tough. And I really send out my love if that's been an experience of yours recently, But, oh God. Yeah, that's definitely a fear of mine. Probably one of the biggest that I'm sure I may get better at managing as I get older, but may also get worse because as I get older, so does everyone else. So, yeah. That's a bit of a strange note to end the podcast on, but I don't have any other notes. I don't have any other fears that I have written down. I'm sure I could list off a few really random ones because we all have like tiny fears that aren't really fears, but just like random things that we don't really enjoy or are kind of scared of. Like, I hate being made jump. Like, when someone jump scares you, I hate it. I have since I was a child, so my sister. We would always cry as soon as someone made us jump or in a movie or whatever. And it's sad because it's one of Christian's favourite things. Like, he loves making people jump, which is kind of mean. But I just will not allow it because I freaking hate it. And it does mean that, like, watching scary movies and stuff, I also don't really enjoy because of the jump scares. But that's one of those things that's just so irrational. Because after, like, 1 minute, less than 1 minute, 30 seconds, I'm fine. Like, I'm still alive. Someone just made me jump. But I think it's just my body's reaction, like, physical reaction to it happening. Just makes me cry for some reason, and I just don't enjoy it. But, yeah, there's so many silly things like that. So definitely let me know what some of your, like, irrational fears are. Or if you want to share, like, a really deep fear that you have over on our Instagram page at To Be Candid Podcast, go ahead. Like, I would be so interested to hear. And I think it's fun to, like, open up like this with people. So, yeah, thanks very much for listening. I hope you have enjoyed this podcast episode. If you have, don't forget you can always leave a review over on Apple Podcasts if you fancy it. I would really appreciate it. And I will be back next Tuesday with a brand new episode. So I will speak to you very soon. Bye.